Early on the morning of April 1st, 2006, something strange happened in downtown Columbus, Ohio. A young man walked into a crowded bar and simply vanished without a trace. That man was Brian Shaffer, a 27-year-old second-year medical student at Ohio State University. He had gone out that night to celebrate the beginning of spring break. By morning, he was gone. No one saw him leave, and despite years of investigation, his disappearance remains one of the most baffling, unsolved missing person cases in recent history. This is the story of Brian's final known hours, the massive investigation that followed, and the mystery that continues to puzzle investigators more than 2 decades later. Who was Brian Shaffer? Born on February 11, 1979, in the Columbus area, Brian was an aspiring doctor, a talented musician, and a well-liked student at Ohio State University's College of Medicine. But in late March 2006, his life was marked by both heartbreak and hope. Just weeks earlier, his mother, Renee, had died after battling a rare form of cancer. Despite his grief, Brian was looking forward to spring break. He and his girlfriend, fellow medical student Alexis Wagner, were scheduled to fly to Miami just days later, where Brian reportedly planned to propose to her. On Friday, March 31st, after finishing his studies, Brian had dinner with his father, Randy. Later that evening, he spoke with Alexis on the phone before heading to the South Campus Gateway Entertainment District. Around 11 p.m., he met his best friend and former roommate, William Clint Florence, at the Ugly Tuna Saloon. It was supposed to be the first stop of an ordinary night out. Instead, it would become the beginning of one of America's most enduring unsolved mysteries. As the night went on, Brian and Clint spent about an hour at the Ugly Tuna Saloon before leaving to visit several nearby bars in the student district. Shortly after midnight, they were joined by Meredith Reed, a friend of Clint's from Cleveland. She drove them back to the Ugly Tuna Saloon, where security cameras captured the three entering the bar together. Inside, the bar was crowded and the music was loud. At one point, Brian and Clint reportedly had a brief argument, though investigators later described it as nothing serious. Just before closing time, security cameras captured Brian outside the entrance, casually talking with 2 young women, later identified as Brighton Zatko and Amber Ruick. He smiled, laughed, and chatted with them for a few minutes before turning back toward the bar. It was the last confirmed sighting of Brian Shaffer. When the bar closed around 2 a.m., everyone began leaving. Clint and Meredith waited outside, expecting Brian to come down the escalator with the rest of the crowd. He never did. After searching the area and receiving no answer when they called his phone, they assumed Brian had gone home without them. At the time, neither of them realized anything was wrong. The following day, concern quickly turned into alarm. Brian never returned home and failed to show up for his planned trip to Florida with his girlfriend, Alexis Wagner. When she tried calling him, his phone went straight to voicemail. Brian's father went to check his apartment. His car was still parked outside, his bed was made, and all of his personal belongings were exactly where they should have been. There were no signs of a struggle. It was then that Brian was officially reported missing. Within days, police, friends, and volunteers launched a massive search. Rewards were offered, vigils were held, and missing person posters appeared throughout Columbus. Yet despite the growing effort, Brian Shaffer had seemingly vanished without a trace. Despite an extensive investigation, every promising lead eventually reached a dead end. Shortly after Brian disappeared, police followed a report that placed him at a local convenience store. Security footage quickly proved the sighting was a mistake. A few weeks later, Brian's apartment was burglarized. Several items were stolen, but investigators determined the break-in was unrelated to his disappearance. Months later, Brian's girlfriend experienced a brief moment of hope when one of her repeated phone calls appeared to make his cell phone ring. Investigators traced the signal to a nearby cell tower, but ultimately concluded it was most likely a network glitch. In 2008, tragedy struck the Shaffer family once again when Brian's father, Randy, was killed during a severe storm. The following day, someone posted a message online claiming to be Brian. Investigators traced it to a public computer in Ohio and confirmed it was nothing more than a cruel hoax. Over the following years, detectives continued chasing new leads. In 2020, a photograph of a homeless man in Tijuana sparked renewed interest, but FBI facial recognition ruled out the possibility that it was Brian. The following year, authorities released an age-progressed image in hopes that someone might recognize him. Despite all these efforts, the case remains unsolved. The greatest mystery has always centered on one question. How did Brian leave the bar without anyone seeing him? The Ugly Tuna Saloon was located on the second floor of the building and was accessible by only one main entrance, an escalator and a nearby staircase, both covered by security cameras. Investigators carefully reviewed every minute of surveillance footage. They confirmed Brian entering the building and later returning with his friends. The final recording showed him talking with two women just outside the bar before turning back toward the entrance. After that, nothing. There is no footage showing Brian leaving the bar. Detectives also confirmed that every other customer and employee captured entering the bar was later seen leaving. Brian was the only exception. Investigators explored every possible explanation. Behind the bar was a little-used service door leading into a construction area. Because it wasn't monitored by cameras, some believe Brian could have slipped out that way. However, the route was dangerous and difficult to navigate, and extensive searches, including cadaver dogs, uncovered no evidence that he had gone there. Another theory suggested Brian escaped through a freight elevator, but investigators found no evidence to support it. They also reviewed footage from nearby businesses, and none of the surrounding cameras captured him leaving the area. More than 20 years later, one fact remains unchanged. Brian Shaffer was seen entering the bar. He was seen talking outside moments before closing, but he was never seen leaving, and no one has ever been able to explain how that was possible. Everyone who saw Brian that night was questioned, including his friends Clint Florence and Meredith Reed, the two women he spoke with outside the bar, bartenders, employees, customers, and even the band performing that night. In total, investigators interviewed more than 100 people. Clint told police the night had been completely normal. When the bar closed, he and Meredith waited for Brian outside, expecting him to come down the escalator. When he never appeared, they assumed he had simply gone home. Meredith gave the same account. She said Brian appeared to be in good spirits and that nothing about his behavior seemed unusual. The two women Brian spoke with outside the bar also told investigators they had only just met him. They described him as friendly, relaxed, and happy. Neither of them saw where he went after their conversation. Bar employees reported nothing suspicious. One worker even said he watched everyone leave at closing time and realized Brian never came out with the crowd. According to everyone who saw him that night, Brian wasn't acting intoxicated, upset, or distressed. Although he reportedly had a brief disagreement with Clint earlier in the evening, witnesses described it as minor. Earlier that night, Brian had also spoken with his girlfriend Alexis, who later said he sounded happy and excited about their upcoming trip. No witness saw Brian leave the bar. No one saw anyone force him into a vehicle. No one reported hearing an argument or seeing a fight. The investigation quickly shifted from who might have been involved to how Brian could have disappeared at all. Police launched an extensive search, retracing Brian's final known movements and searching the bar, nearby construction sites, the banks of the Olentangy River, dumpsters, hospitals, shelters, and jails. Nothing was found. Investigators released surveillance images of Brian, hoping someone would recognize him. The reward for information eventually grew to $100,000. Police also ruled out several popular theories. They found no evidence of robbery or kidnapping, concluded that the burglary at Brian's apartment was unrelated, and dismissed any connection to the so-called smiley face killer theory. Lead investigator John Hurst later said detectives focused on three possibilities. Brian suffered an accident after leaving the bar, chose to disappear voluntarily, or became the victim of an unknown attacker. Despite years of investigation, none of those theories could be proven. Cadaver dogs searched the area. FBI specialists examined evidence and later used facial recognition to investigate a man photographed in Tijuana in 2020, but it was not Brian. More than 2 decades later, detectives continue to accept new tips, but the mystery remains exactly where it began. A man walked into a crowded bar, and no one can explain how he vanished. As we've seen, the disappearance of Brian Shaffer remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of the modern era. Despite countless interviews, surveillance footage, forensic analysis, and years of investigation, no one has been able to answer the one question that matters most. What really happened to Brian? Sometimes, even when it seems like all the pieces are on the table, the truth remains just out of reach. Every clue raises new questions instead of providing answers. Every theory has flaws, and every passing year reminds us that some mysteries refuse to be solved. Perhaps one day someone will come forward with the missing piece that finally explains what happened that night. Until then, Brian Shaffer's disappearance remains a haunting reminder that not every story has an ending, and not every mystery has an answer. If you enjoyed this documentary and want to see more real-life mysteries, unsolved cases, and true crime stories, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.